welcome everyone to today's webinar on the rights of nature and the rights of rivers in Europe. It's wonderful to see so many of you here today. My name is Amelie Huber. I'm a part of the freshwater team at EuroNature Foundation and the Save the Blue Heart of Europe campaign. I'll be moderating today's session and I'll be guiding our discussion. A very warm welcome as well to our outstanding panel of speakers. We are very thrilled to have you all with us today. We have Marie Toussaint, member of the European Parliament with the European Greens, Annette Mehlhorn, who's a researcher at Humboldt University in Berlin, Zoe Lujic, sorry if I mispronounce, founder and leader of the Balkan Center for the Rights of Nature, Eduardo Salazar Ortuño, he's adjunct professor of administrative law at the University of Murcia. And finally, joining us all the way from the United States is Grant Wilson. He's the executive director of the Earth Law Center. So thank you all for joining us and for contributing your expertise and experience and perspectives to this important discussion. I'm also very grateful to the colleagues supporting this webinar behind the scenes. A very warm thank you to Conny Wieser, Roxanne Diaz, Annette Spangenberg, Leonard Sonden, and Uli Eichelmann for helping to make this event possible. So let me begin with a few words on the rights of nature from our perspective as organizers. The topic of rights of nature is certainly not new. However, it is relatively new to us as organizers of this webinar, and perhaps also to some of you joining you today. Within the Save the Blue Heart of Europe campaign, we have not previously engaged directly in the rights of nature debate. That said, through our Lawyers of Rivers initiative, which brings together around 15 lawyers and legal and policy experts from various Balkan countries, we've been working for about 13 years in courts and before international institutions from Ljubljana to Tirana and from Geneva and Strasbourg to Brussels, challenging infringements that threaten the last free-flowing rivers of the Balkans. Our experts are deeply familiar with existing national and international environmental law safeguards, but we also know that one of the main problems and a hard one to tackle is often not the law itself, but the lack of its enforcement. Our legal team has worked on a comprehensive document showing that, which we'll put in the Q&A section for you to access. So the Rights of Nature movement proposes new approaches to protecting nature, especially rivers, but not only, by granting legal personhood to rivers and other natural entities. For today's webinar, we've invited experts who have for many years, and in some cases even decades, closely followed or actively contributed to the development of the Rights of Nature movement. And clearly this topic resonates strongly. We have a record-breaking 318 plus, I have stopped counting registrations, which was the highest number we've ever had for a webinar. So that just shows how much interest and curiosity there is around this discussion. The aim of today's session is to gain insights into the current state of the global debate on the rights of nature and to explore how far it has progressed in Europe. In particular, we want to stimulate a critical discussion about the added value that rights of nature might bring to European river protection or nature protection in general as well, and to our ongoing efforts to defend the rivers in Europe and the Western Balkans. So the questions we ultimately want to explore are, do we actually need rights of nature in Europe, given our strong existing environmental laws? And if so, what promise might it hold for our continued efforts to protect rivers? So we're very much looking forward to an engaging and thought-provoking discussion with all of you today. Before we move to our speakers, I will give a few quick technical notes. The webinar will be held in English. If helpful, you can turn on live captions in your preferred language in the meeting sessions. I actually forgot to pass on the presentation that I put on. Just a sec, because I have to recover it. because we have everything in writing as well, the speakers' names, and also the housekeeping rules. So you can turn on live captions in your preferred language. The session will be recorded, and we'll share the recording afterwards on our website, www.balkanrivers.net. We won't be using the chat function, but we do have a Q&A feature, which you will find in the control bar at the top of your screen. So please feel free to post your questions there at any time during the session. And then in the second half of the webinar, we'll bring some selected questions to our speakers. We won't be able to pick them all. So if you see a question that you like to be answered, then please upvote it by clicking on the vote button. That helps us prioritize the topics that resonate most with you. And yeah, sorry if we missed your question. And if it's really urgent, don't hesitate to follow up with us afterwards. And then finally, we'll send around a feedback form after the webinar in the coming days via Eventbrite. And we'd really value your thoughts and suggestions for future webinars and for possible follow-up events on rights of nature. And with that, let us now turn to our first speaker. Annette Mehlhorn is based at Humboldt University in Berlin, where she researches foundational questions in environmental knowledge. Previously, she's worked at the Max Planck Institute for Social Anthropology in Halle. She will introduce us to the rights of nature movement and its global and European developments, including why rivers are so central to this discussion. So Annette, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for the organization. I'm really happy to be here to discuss and to learn together. Yeah, because I'm really convinced that rights of nature do raise really crucial questions and give us so much material to discuss these questions.
I will bring on your presentation. Just give me a sec.
Perfect. Yeah.
Go. Sorry, it takes some time to switch. And I'm going to full screen. Yes, there we go.
Perfect. Yeah, maybe we can go directly to the next slide.
Yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. So here I think we see that rights of nature are incredibly successful, and I think we will discuss in the course of this event if, when, and how they are really successful in doing what they set out to do and what it even is that they set out to do. But what can be said quite uncontestedly is that they are successful in entering new contexts, traveling around the world, capturing the imagination of people all over the world or in very different contexts, becoming an increasingly popular way to speak about environmental justice and to organize for it. In 1988, just as one example, the German magazine Der Spiegel still titled a very early rights of nature case as absurd. And if we look at the map now, with, depending on how we count, over 400 documented initiatives, it is clear that rights of nature are not absurd anymore. They are a reality. And I think that is something quite fascinating and absolutely study worthy in itself. Like, why are rights of nature so successful? And what happens when a concept travels from one context to another? What happens when people in different contexts refer to the same language and yeah, terminology? Today I will speak quite broadly and as a way of introduction, I think. And I just want to make a few small points, which I hope will be a base for further discussion. So the main takeaway is that rights of nature, they're not magical words that by just putting them into law somehow change everything. They're also not like natural or evident developments. So it's not that it's an obvious next step of like rights expansion, maybe, that this just has to follow. Rather, rights of nature can mean very different things in different instances. And on the other hand, and this might sound like a different contradictory now, they also cannot mean everything. And that's also something we have to think about, because the form of rights and legal subjectivity, they're not neutral vessels, but they form how we understand something and how we can fight for it or not fight for it. So just very quickly and superficially, maybe the next slide. Yeah, and so origins of rights of nature are contested. Anyone who has ever been in a discussion might know this, and all these debates about origins are, of course, yeah, they're quite loaded, because like claims to origin, as Edward Said said, are always also like claims to power. So it's not only about historical veracity, but if I say, okay, rights of nature originated in the US in an NGO context, or maybe in indigenous philosophies, yeah, that these claims obviously do more than just point to historical facts. But no matter where the origin might be, what is clear that what led to this fact that rights of nature are anything but absurd nowadays are legal and political processes in Latin America in the 2000s, notably the processes around the new constitutions in Ecuador and Bolivia. So we have the Ecuadorian constitution that very prominently developed the idea of rights of nature, for example, here in Article 71, where it yeah, very, very famously says nature, or Pachamama, where life is reproduced and exists, has the right to exist, persist, maintain, and regenerate its vital cycle, structure, functions, and its processes in evolution. In Bolivia, we have Mother Earth laws, then also a lot of like, yeah, very important rulings by constitutional courts. This just as a quick note, and we can go to the next slide. So rights of nature travel, and this fact that they travel is often quite central in arguments about rights of nature. So they travel from the global south to the global north. It is often emphasized, also contested, but so we might call it a reverse legal transplant, and kind of counters this very long history of colonial imposition of European law on the rest of the world. It is often emphasized that rights of nature travel from indigenous law, indigenous philosophy into dominant Western law and philosophy. So, for example, we might wonder if rights of nature can kind of address what in a recent intervention Sultana called climate coloniality, I quote, which can constrain what actions are possible, often destroying pluriversal epistemologies, methodologies, and ontologies necessary for meaningful climate justice. They also travel from discipline to discipline. They travel from outside of the law into the legal subject. So we have many processes of translation. Maybe we can look at the next slide. Now, about these travels and translations, there are many, many debates, quite heated debates. So are these translations maybe mistranslations. That's something that's often claimed or like brought up in relation to indigenous knowledge. For example, Fausto Quispe, he claims that rights of nature shows the violence when the indigenous world is swallowed up and only fragments are presented. And these fragments then are often sanitized, not dangerous versions of thought anymore. Is it maybe an instrumentalization of indigeneity that is happening, where this reference to indigeneity is only made to give force to arguments that have nothing to do with actual struggles? Is it maybe, as for example, Virginia Marshall argues, is the idea of rights of nature, even an anathema to indigenous law and culture? So there are many debates which I think raise really important question regarding rights of nature and beyond. Maybe the next slide, please. So I also see I don't have a lot of time left. So just very quickly, what are rights of nature about? They're about many different things depending on the context, and that is very crucial to notice. So, for example, Eden Kincaid writes that they become articulated through specific practices, cultural meanings, material networks, human environment relations, legal regimes, governance structures, and political projects in culturally and geographically specific ways with often counterintuitive outcomes. So they take an example where they claim that rights of nature might even get entangled with nationalist, racist projects, which might not be the norm, but which just shows how important this accounting of the context within which they're instrumentalized is. So what are rights of nature about? They can be about many things. Of course, they can be about protecting nature, as one might think. They might be about tackling anthropocentrism, as it is always or often claimed as well, but they might also actually be about very human concerns. They might be about local autonomy, strengthening local self-governance, many different things. Then just finally, and just very quickly, because I'm running out of time, as I've said, they're about many things, but this form of rights and of legal subjectivity, it's not a neutral form that can be just filled with anything, but this already forms how we think about something and maybe not think about ways of mobilization, of analyzing our object and mobilizing to change it. There's a lot of long literature about the juridification of protest and how it might depoliticize or tame again protests. So law obviously is important because law is everywhere. Law is it cannot be ignored. But I think it's really crucial to think about what are the possibilities, but also what are the limitations of law, and following on that, what should be its role in the struggle that we want to be a part of. I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Annette. That was really insightful, let's say, stimulus for starting into this webinar. Building on that, we'll now hear from Grant Wilson, who will share his insights on enacting rights of nature legislation in different parts of the world, and what lessons might apply to Europe. Grant is the executive director of the Earth Law Center in the United States and a trained lawyer. The Earth Law Center works globally to advance rights of nature and Earth-centered laws. And Grant has played a key role in drafting legislation and winning legal landmark cases for rivers and ecosystems worldwide. And I think he's also engaged now in drafting rights of nature legislation in Europe. So we'll be excited to hear about that. Grant, over to you.
Thank you. So great to speak in front of you all today. I'll assume you can see my presentation unless I hear otherwise. I'm a lawyer for nature. I have spent my entire career reimagining how our current laws, which are just focused on human interests, can be reimagined to put nature directly into the legal system. And I've kind of gone through every area of the law and what would it mean if nature had a voice, and how can our law evolve to represent all life on the planet. And rights of nature and rights of rivers is a core part of that. This is me standing in the Ponce River in Colombia, which has rights according to Colombian law and has a guardianship body speaking on its behalf. I also have a special love for all rivers, and some rivers are buried under cities or barely exist, but they still have a little bit of life left, a spring coming out of a sewer. And I've really spent my career representing the voice of all rivers and believe they have a right to flow, a right to thrive, and a right to regenerate. I want to give you a quick story on the rights of nature, just to give you some context for rivers. This is the Marañón River in the peaks of the Andes in Peru, where it's born. It then flows in for hundreds of miles into the depths of the Amazon. So it goes from very high to lower. But here is polluted by oil, and there's dozens of oil spills in recent decades. And the indigenous people who live there, the Cucama indigenous people in particular, have said, we love this river, but it is slowly killing us. And they spent decades fighting these oil spills in this river in Peru until eventually they decided, we want to take this to court. And they also reflected that this river is not just a thing, it's not just property, it's not just a resource. Our ancestors live in the river. We are part of the river. And so when you think about the cultural understanding we all have for rivers, and then you look at the law that treats it as something very different and simplified, there's a huge gap there. And so they brought a case to court arguing for the rights of this river. This is Javier Ruz, one of our amazing lawyers at Earth Law Center, who basically told the judge, you have a chance to create a paradigm shift and the whole world is watching you. And indeed, the judge ruled that this river has rights. It has a right to flow. It has a right to be free from pollution. It has a right to restoration. And not only that, but they committed to appointing the cultural guardians and protectors of this river, the Cucama indigenous people, especially Cucama women, as the legal guardians of this river. So they will now speak on its behalf. Mariluz Kanakiri, the local leader of that campaign, won a Goldman Prize, and it was the year after another amazing initiative in Europe also received a Goldman Prize, which we'll hear about a little later. So I ask you to think, what is a river to you in your context, wherever you are in Europe? The law says that rivers are resources, they're property, they're commodities, it's drinking water, it's conveyance systems, they're navigable waters for boats. They're jurisdictional waters. They set borders. This is what our law says a river is, legally speaking. All of these things is a river. But we know in reality, rivers are sacred. They're kin, they're relatives, they're knowledge keepers, they're ancestors, they're souls, they're teachers, they're living beings, and they are rights holders. So wherever you are in Europe, think about, what does your culture say a river is? What is your own belief system for what a river is? And then look at what the law says it is. And I promise you there's going to be an immense gap between those two things. And rights of nature is really a way to close that gap, because all of these things on the right, the rivers in reality, if you translate those things into a legal perspective, it can mean rights. Relatives, your kin have rights, sacred entities have rights, on and on. And so there's examples of this all over the world, of where people's value systems are beginning to be reflected in law through the rights of rivers. In Ecuador, the holy grail of rights of nature movements, we've seen multiple cases where courts have either refused a dam, such as in the Piatua River on the right, or it called for ecological flows and questioned the existence of current dams, such as with the Dulce Pamba River on the left, because rivers have a right to holistic, integral health, and that's looking at the entire watershed, not just the little water body. Rights of Nature supports guardianship of nature, giving rivers a voice. This is the famous Wanganui River, where the Crown government and Maori Indigenous people are co-guardians of this river, so actually speaking for it. Rights of Nature can support peace building. There's an amazing effort in Northern Ireland and Lough Neagh to give this lake, the largest lake in the UK, a voice. But an increasing amount of rights of nature cases also incorporate this idea of peace building. Let's restore the ecosystem, let's give it a voice, and let's ourselves as a society come together and reconcile some of the past challenges that we've had. Pooja Sharma is a lawyer at Earth Law Center working on this, who I think is on this call based in London. So reach out if you're interested in this case. And then rights of nature reflects local culture. This is the Ganga River, or Ganges in India, where it was given rights. It was later reversed, a long story, but it was given rights based on the understanding this river is a deity. It's a god under Hinduism. And how can you say that a deity or a god is mere property? Lastly, rights of nature. A river supports intergenerational justice. I'm really proud that in the little town I live in, Durango, a group of students and their professor, Rebecca Clausen, worked to declare the rights of our local river as a student-led initiative. So all the students here, please go out and declare the rights of your local rivers. Internationally, there is a global movement for the rights of nature. It's at the United Nations. It's in the Convention on Biological Diversity, which explicitly recognizes nature's rights. And there's a new IUCN motion, number 67, on living in harmony with rivers through the rights of nature and ecocentric law. Earth Law Center was the lead sponsor of this, and I was in negotiating rooms with different European countries, and there was a little bit of hesitancy, but some strong interest. So check this out. It's the shaping of international law towards the rights of rivers happening at the highest levels of the world. There's also a cultural revolution you've all seen, Is a River Alive? A great movie, I'm the River is Me, about the Wanganui River. And shout out Earth Law Center, the group I run. On February 1st, 2 weeks ago, we released our new law school course book about ecocentric law, which goes all into rights of rivers and rights of nature. Please check it out. So I want to conclude by just sharing a few insights into Europe. Things I've noticed. I often notice people saying that EU law is, quote, strong enough, pointing to the Water Framework Directive, which is great. I love European law. It's very, very strong. But I think this is ignoring some of the challenges and shortcomings of current environmental laws. We might hear more about this later or in Q&A. One example is just that the Water Framework Directive has an exception for an overriding public interest. That means economic development in many cases. But rivers are part of the public too. Should we really water down our environmental laws in the interest of short-term economic frameworks? There's an addiction to dams in Europe, and one time this was addressed was through a great Balkan Rights of Nature tribunal. Zoe Lucic is here to talk about that. Also, International Rivers partnered on it. One of the things I want to point out is that in the Renewable Energy Directive, why should dams be renewable? From the perspective of a river, they permanently devastate ecosystems. That is non-renewable. It is forever. And maybe we should create a new category for dams. I'll skip over the rest of these because I'm almost at time, but I'm happy to talk more about the European context. There is a kind of renaissance of ecocentrism in Europe that's really exciting. There's all this energy, there's people advancing campaigns everywhere. And in my opinion, it's one of the two hot spots in the entire world for this movement, along with Latin America. Lastly, we are doing some work in the Balkans, working with Atelier for Community Transformation, or ACT, in Bosnia, also working for the Balkan Center for Rights of Nature, who we'll hear from later. I'm actually popping by Sarajevo, and I'll be there this Friday, February 27th at 7 p.m. Come meet me. Zoe, you emailed me about this today. Come visit and let's hang out. Lastly, why are we there? It's on a way to London. It's a stopover, and Earth Law Center is opening an office in London on March 4th. So please, if you're in London, if you're in Europe, come reach out. Hope to see you in Sarajevo. Hope to see you in London. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Grant. I want to throw in two questions here before we move on to the next set of presentations. One to you, and then I'll also have one for Annette. Because rivers are one of the natural entities that has received, I don't know if it's disproportionate attention in the rights of nature movement. Do they hold a special place in this rights of nature debate? And if so, why?
Yeah, absolutely they do. And there's so many reasons. One is that everyone lives in a watershed. Everyone here lives in a watershed. So we're all part of a river system, and we're not separate from that watershed. We're part of it. And that's where I think the law goes wrong. It says humans are separate from nature. There's the river, there's the species in the river, there's the human rights and interest, and it's all separate, and there's 30 laws for all of them. Rights of nature is an opportunity to look at the philosophy behind our legal system and say that we are all interconnected, and the law should reflect that. And rights of rivers is a foundation of how we can move in that direction. So we're all part of watersheds. We're all part of nature. Another reason is just the immense cultural and health significance of rivers. Many of us have a strong cultural connection to rivers. It has significance to us, whether it's spiritual or religious, or just the fact that we grew up loving a certain place. And so it's very easy to translate this religious value, this cultural value, or just this love, the fact that we love a river. And something that you love, should it be treated as property? Do you treat family members that you love as just a thing? So it's easy to translate these beliefs about rivers into law, so it's pretty natural. And I think it's just also a movement where there's a lot of a greater amount of cohesion and understanding about what it means. Rivers have a right to flow. You can define that through ecological flows. That's pretty straightforward. You can work on dam removal projects. I think maybe with some other ecosystems, the actual legal side of things are a bit less developed. And let's develop them. There's a lot of potential there, but right now there's a lot of clarity behind what rights of rivers can mean. And I have expertise in that space, and others do. If people have specific questions about what it means in practice, happy to talk about that later.
Thanks a lot. And maybe we can also bring in Annette for a second. Although that is a question that you might both want to answer, but let's see if Annette gets to go first. Leo, can you bring her in?
She got thrown out, I think.
Oh,
or
that's not good.
She lost connection.
Okay, so we'll go first. I'd ask the question to you, Grant, and then we can see if Annette wants to comment on it later. In Europe, some would argue that we lack the spiritual perspective on which the rights of nature concept is based, especially in indigenous societies. Is that true, and is it a problem?
The question is that we lack it? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we lack this, let's say, spiritual perspective in our society, in societies. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say that's in some cases some truth, but also some, I push back on that a little bit. I think in many parts of Europe, there was a deep spiritual connection and even a belief in animism and a worship for the natural world. Not that long ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, and in some cases, parts of that were lost. Like I'm thinking of in the Balkans, there's many places that did have a deep reverence, a spiritual reverence for nature, and then different religions moved around, and some of that is just like barely buried under the surface, but is still there. So I'd say there's that part of things. I also think that there is a spiritual awakening in terms of our connection to nature, and it doesn't require a specific religion or frame of thought. It wasn't that long ago that humans were deeply connected to nature culturally just across the world. And I think there's a little bit of amnesia that and this is talked about in Robert McFarlane's Is a River Alive book, this idea that there's a little bit of amnesia from generation to generation, and a forgetfulness that just one generation ago or two, we were deeply connected to rivers and ecosystems, and that we've lost a little bit of that. And so actually my hope with the rights of nature and rights of rivers is not just that there's a law on the books, but that it creates a cultural awakening along the way. Because we've always seen with rights-based movements, whether it's for gay rights or indigenous rights or women's rights, as the law evolved, there's a parallel cultural awakening and respect for nature. And you think of the treatment of women or former slaves when they were property, and maybe there were welfare laws to protect human property, which are slaves, and was that good enough? But then when something has rights, there's a culture of respect and a shift, and everything changes. And so, I hope that there's going to be a journey in Europe to find your connection with nature on a deeper level once again, And the rights of nature is going to rapidly accelerate that journey. So if you're of the belief that, you know, the environmental crisis is not going to change until we change in our hearts, until communities change, and I really believe that, I agree. And, you know, how are we going to do that? The law can help create that change in people, and it will. So I encourage you to embrace the rights of nature for that reason. So thank you.
Thank you. We're not sure the Annette who's on screen now is the right Annette, because it seems she got kicked out of the webinar for some reason. Annette, is it you?
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
back. I got kicked out, but now I can. Yeah, thank you.
Did you hear the question, or would you want me to repose it again?
I heard it, and also Grant's really interesting answer, which I would agree with. I also wouldn't think in these very binary categories that like the West and the rest, and I think that's unhelpful in many ways. I also think, though, that we have to think seriously about how we analyze the reasons for the like catastrophic times we live in and the way out. And I think rights of nature does stress often this change in how we see nature, this move away from anthropocentrism, this new connection with nature. And I think that's absolutely fascinating, but there are many debates about what that might not show, or which analysis and which kind of possible struggles this might obscure. And I think these debates are really important to have also within the rights of nature debates. Like, is it all, I mean, nobody says it's all right, but is it like primarily a question of mentality, or should we rather first look at the very material realities of inequality, of of property regimes, and how do mentality and these material realities go together, and can we change? Where does change have to really start? And I would say this overemphasis on a change of attitude, while it's something really powerful and fascinating, might obscure other things that are really crucial.
Okay, thanks to both of you. We have to move on. Let's now welcome Marie Toussaint, who will share her experience advocating for the recognition of the rights of nature at the EU level. Marie has been a member of the European Parliament with the European Greens since 2019. She's also a French environmental activist and international environmental law jurist. And she founded 2 rights of nature initiatives, the NGO Notre Affaire à Tous and the Ecocide Alliance, as well as initiating Europe's largest climate litigation case. So Marie, the floor is yours. Marie, are you with us? Maybe Marie has gone for a quick break. If so, we may want to just change the order of the presentations and call Eduardo to go first. Yeah, maybe that's the best way to go. Unless Marie is coming. Yeah, Eduardo. So then I'll give your introduction first. With Eduardo, we wanted to zoom in on on Europe's first successful rights of nature case, actually, the Mar Menor in Spain, with a first-hand account from the person who led the case. So Eduardo Salazar Ortuño has been a public interest environmental lawyer for 25 years, and he's currently adjunct professor of administrative law at the University of Murcia. And drawing on his experience as the promoter of the Mar Menor Act and the vice president of the Representatives Commission of Mar Menor and its basin stewardship, That's a really long name for a body. Eduardo will explain how the rights of nature was enacted in his case, the lessons learned, and also what it has meant for the conservation of the Mar Menor lagoon in practice. Eduardo, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for inviting us. I mean all the people in Mar Menor. I will share my presentation, which is here. Can you see?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. I will speak on behalf of the Mar Menor as the vice president of the representatives committee in the tutorship, which is I will explain later what's the tutorship. The Mar Menor is as you may probably know, it's a coastal lagoon in the southeast of Spain, with many ecological, health, and spiritual values. It was famous for its transparent waters, and it is part of Natura 2000 network, and it's a regional park. You can see here the person. Due to human activities, mostly in its basin, for example, industrial farming, Mar Menor became an eutrophicated green soup after 2016. People reacted on the streets. In 2019, tons of fish and crustaceans died on the shores because of the lack of oxygen. It was shocked. People there then were angry and hopeless. Professor Teresa Vicente, I am working with her, and she won the Goldman Prize in 2024. Was able to propose an idea inspired by the increasing rise of nature movement from the global south to recognize legal personhood and grant rights to the lagoon and its basin. This is important, not only the lagoon, but the basin. The way to make it possible was a popular legislative initiative during the pandemic, collecting in 12 months more than 600,000 signatures from Spanish citizens. This bottom-up movement in Spain to grant rights to the Mar Menor has been powerful and will be unforgettable. All the political parties in the parliament, except the ultra-right, supported the law, which was approved in September 2022. It was when we were bringing the signatures to Madrid from Murcia. The ultra-right party challenged the Mar Menor Act before the Spanish Constitutional Court. After 2 years, the highest court in Spain ruled in favor of the first ecocentric law in Spain and in Europe. The Constitutional Court, the Spanish Constitutional Court, acknowledged in its judgment the intrinsic value of the ecosystems, the connection between human and non-human dignity, and the moderate ecocentrism introduced by the Mar Menor Act. In February 2025, the government approved the regulation that organized the functioning of the Mar Menor and its basin tutorship. This is the law. On the 29th of May 2025 at the University of Murcia, where I am now, and before a notary, the tutorship and its 3 committees, representatives, follow-up or monitoring, and scientific committee, were created, and its members and the manager were appointed. Today, the committees are an example of participatory democracy in the management of an ecosystem. We had around 4 or 5 meetings until now, including all the stakeholders around the lagoon at the administrations. I mean, fishermen, farmers, NGOs, neighbors, trade unions, many stakeholders. There are proposals to the discussions, many discussions, mediation, and settlements in the direction to evaluate the state of the ecosystem, adopting measures to stop pollution and to activate restoration. Mar Menor has also appeared before the Spanish courts as a private prosecutor in criminal cases against polluters claiming for environmental damage. Using the Article 6, you can go to the court and act on behalf of the Mar Menor. We will have the first case in court, the hearing, the public hearing. We will the trial we will have in May 2026. And I want to finish saying that Mar Menor movement is also a proposal for Europe, because we are participating in the European Citizen Initiative for Rights of Nature, together with other citizen associations in the European Union. And you can see here, and you can have more information here about the initiative. So it is I am finished. Thank you very much. You are welcome to visit the Mar Menor and meet this new person.
Thanks, Eduardo. Really interesting, and I'm also really excited that we are all able to go and defend Mar Menor in court. That was going to be one of my questions, but I'll pose it after the next two presentations. We'll try and bring Marie back now. Marie, I think you need to switch on camera and video. Could you try if that's possible? Yes, great. Okay, fantastic. I gave your introduction already. So with you, we wanted to zoom in a little bit on the attempt to bring rights of nature legislation into the EU at EU level. So
really much thanking you and thanking you for your presentation, saying I do have the science topical side behind me, so that shows the consistency with your presentation. And I really much wanted to thank you on Nature for organizing this webinar. I think it's quite important that we keep the dynamics up, and I think through the previous presentations that were full of energy and dynamism and enthusiasm, we could see that indeed the movement is very much alive. And I do agree with Grant and with others, and we'll see that also with Zoe, that there is this common idea that the rights of nature are not for Europe, and that Europe is so much Cartesian, it's so rational, and it cannot apprehend its relation to the living that is non-human. But it's actually not true. For many different reasons. First of all, because we do have indigenous people, ecocentric cultures on EU territory because of colonialism, of course. But for instance, we have the Sami in Sweden, in the north of Sweden, and we also have a lot of, especially French colonies, I'm French, especially French colonies where these cultures are very much present. And we have the case of New Caledonia and some islands that are attached to France, where the rights of nature were put into the law. So it's now being discussed, but there was a big step forward already. We have different islands, so a former colony like Martinique, but also an island closest to us, which is Corsica, who are asking for the recognition of the rights of nature, and especially the rights of rivers. We've heard Eduardo and the example of the Mar Menor, so we can see that this is really also from within. And where I do want to end up with is that, of course, as Grant said, we were connected to the river not such a long time ago. And actually, when we look at and when we read at sociologic studies, when we look at testimonies that are not so old, we can perfectly see that the people are talking about nature as livings. And we also have this big cultural legacy with poetry, for instance, with a lot of poetry, consecrating the life in non-humans, and also those old knowledge that somehow, we talk to our plants, we talk to our animals. So this is very much present still, but we just need to push it. And I think also that something is happening right now, despite the fact that the European context and the global, actually, political context is so bad, and especially so bad for green issues, with a lot of laws being attacked, and it was said in the chat as well, and especially on water. But still, despite this very bad context, things are moving. We've talked about the movies. I've been also reached out by a lot of students and documentary makers, actually, to present and to push for those issues. And the discussion at EU level is growing and keeps on growing. And I think I know that the European Citizen Initiative is being prepared as well. That could be launched quite soon, actually, as soon as the European Commission gives it go. But that shows that really something is happening, and that's the moment for us to stay strong and keep the momentum alive and push for it, and show, as it was shown in the previous presentations, that the rights of nature, well, it does include human, because nature includes humans. So recognizing the non-human parts, the non-human rights, is also helping human rights to being fulfilled and respected. And I think we have a lot of examples throughout the world that the rights of nature, social issues, dignity of human beings as well, are being progressing all over the place. But just maybe to get back on where we stand at EU level, because I talked to you about the European Citizen Initiative, but maybe you're more interested in what I can bring you, which is what is the institutional view on the rights of nature. And to be fully honest, when I got elected in the parliament, I had this will to push forward the rights of nature, but also accountability and liability for big polluters, especially the carbon majors, and the recognition of ecocide. I thought that it would take me 10 to 15 years. But actually, in less than 5 years, we got ecocide, or at least the definition of ecocide, even if the word is not used, but the definition of ecocide in EU law when it comes to protecting the environment through penal law. And I can tell you that many NGOs also didn't believe in it. They didn't think that we could make it. And we did make it. So that was in the previous term. And at that moment, when I entered in 2019, it was really far from easy. And I can perfectly remember one of the commissioners, when he was in a room with me and I was raising my hand and raising questions about the rights of nature. He was looking at me with a little smile. He was an older man, very much used to political exercise. And he was looking at me, he was like, yeah, that's the Pachamama, like making fun of me. And actually, it went further, and we managed to get the URI committee, so the Legal Affairs Committee, commission a study. I mean, they changed the title. I don't know what they did, but they did order a study, and we had a study published in 2021 on the rights of nature, an official report, an official study from the European Parliament, commissioned by the European Parliament, which is called "Can Nature Get It Right?" And what was funny, it was the guy who answered, the searcher who did the study for the European Parliament, he was not a believer in the rights of nature. And he begins the study by saying that, and then he analyzes what does the rights of nature mean. And in the end, he says, okay, I'm not a believer in the rights of nature, but these people, they actually have a point. And that was the end of the study. So that was really interesting. And we pushed for an evaluation of the Environmental Liability Directive to happen. I think that some people from our global network of environmentally and nature ecocentric people were also among the redactors of this evaluation. Well, now we don't want it to be published so soon because the context is so bad, but the evaluation was on its way. And I ordered an additional study to Nathalie Hervé-Fornereau to analyze the ways we could put rights of nature into EU law. So we have this study as well that is showing that we can act in very much different directions from an EU charter, a new charter on the rights of nature, which is also a solution that was put forward by the European Socio-Economic Council, so another institution that pushed for the recognition of the rights of nature. We can have special directives, we can have the adaptation of EU law, and we can imagine many different ways of recognizing the rights of nature, to the least ambitious to the most ambitious. So this is a bit the state of play right now. But I do strongly believe that the recognition of the rights of nature in Europe will come and must actually come from the ground. And we've discussed the Mar Menor. I've told you about Corsica, about the Tavinenu River. We've discussed about Martinique. It's also a lagoon in Martinique, and that they try to defend. But we also have a lot of initiatives in Poland, in the Netherlands, throughout the EU territory, and in Serbia, in the neighboring country, as we will explain. And I do think that we need, if we want the rights of nature, not only to be bureaucratic and, you know, just legal ways, but if we want it to be really true in its sincerity and in its meaning, and also how can we dig the issue of the representation of the living elements, it needs to come from the ground. So what I really want to see, and what I hope with this European Citizen Initiative, is that, well, at least 1 million people from 7 different countries will sign it, but also that the collectivities and member states throughout the EU will take it and push for it, and we can count on the big communities that we are in order to achieve this goal. So yeah, I think that's my point for now. And just to add that even though rights of nature are so new in the European context and so on, I just want to tell you still that we've managed to get a position from the European Parliament talking about the intrinsic value of the ecosystems and calling from ancient and primary forests. So it's not rivers yet, but still, but for ancient and primary forests to be considered global common and their ecosystem to be granted legal status. So this is just the first step, but this is a promising step from the European Parliament, and we can try to push it and make it bigger and truer in the future.
Thank you, Marie. I think I would like to throw in a question here now. And basically, one of the criticisms that, well, maybe I should put this into perspective. We've discussed the rights of nature a little bit with our network, Lawyers of Rivers network, and a lot of critical questions came up. And so some of the questions I'm bringing in here come from this round of people who in theory would like to believe in it, but in practice are doubtful. Not saying that the whole group is has anonymous views. One of the questions was, especially given the ongoing deregulation of environmental legal frameworks in the EU at the moment, is this a good moment to push for the rights of nature? Or does it deflect, energies away from something that is more urgent right now? So if you could just briefly react on that.
Yeah, I mean, deregulation is on this way. It's huge. It's not over yet, and we need to resist. Just to tell you, but in the last mandate, so there were elections again in 2024. Between 2019 and 2024, we're having great ambitions and fighting to reach our goals. And sometimes we met them, as on the eco side. And sometimes we missed also. But since 2024, it's the other way around. We fight in order to protect what we can protect. And every step we take, or almost every step we take, is a step back. So our fight as green protectors, green defenders, is really not to step back too much. And this is a very different change of context. Now, that doesn't mean that we should stop fighting. And that's one of the first answer, because I have a second one. But we need to keep on fighting, or else we will. If we don't keep on defending the nature, who will do it? Because the trees, as long as we don't have a rights of nature framework, they won't be able to do it. The rivers either. And I could develop like that, so on and so on. So we really need to keep standing. The only thing is that we have to manage our strengths. So really much choosing our priorities, choosing the way we want to move forward, ensure that each time we defend something, it is with the people. I think this is absolutely key. And I think we've made mistakes as a green movement in the past, not all the time, of course, but sometimes forgetting about the people and that we need to act with the people. So just the first answer, and we need to keep fighting. And then the second one is that in this context where everything is so bad, we need to have new concepts, new visions, new hopes, because at some point we will win again. How will we build this new dynamic, this new wave? How will we make it? And I think it's really, really important that we keep on working on how will we want to develop after this very bad moment that we're into. And I believe that working on the rights of nature, how to make it right, how to make it strong, how to make it irreversible is absolutely essential.
Thank you, Marie. I also have one question to Eduardo, if he can come back into the discussion. Could you just tell us a little bit, as we are now going to, move the discussion towards a region where the rights of nature has, where there's proposals going on to enact rights of nature legislation. From your successful case, can you give some lessons learned? Not just on what went well, but also on the difficulties you faced, and also if there have been any sort of spin-off effects, either in the positive or in the negative, from this case and the experience with it.
Yes, I can say that many jurists, I mean professors, lawyers, were from the beginning skeptical to rights of nature, skeptical to the idea of Mar Menor governing by people. But day after day, we are convincing these people because we are making the way. We are showing that the committee is working. The people the people which is participating in the committees, and they were elected by using systems to guarantee the how can I say, the faith in the Mar Menor philosophy of ecosystem. I mean the Mar Menor. We need to understand the Mar Menor as an ecosystem, and we are showing that the people can do it. And the jurist people, the professors, sometimes they were reluctant to this change of mind, to this change of paradigm. And the ultra-right party is still trying to deprotect the Mar Menor, not this law, but other regional protecting laws in Mar Menor. And we are using the tutorship to fight against these ultra-right intentions to deprotect the Mar Menor with the traditional or anthropocentric laws.
Thank you. I have another question on Mar Menor, but I will bring it back later. I would like to now ask Zoe to come back. Well, she's already here. I don't remember if I gave your introduction, so I will do it again if I did. Zoe Luik will guide us through her experience bringing rights of nature to the Balkans, a region that is also of particular importance to our river protection campaign. She is the founder and leader of Earth Thrive and the Balkan Center for the Rights of Nature, and has been a dedicated rights of nature advocate since 2012. She has contributed to early legal developments, including drafting national rights of rivers legislation in Serbia, and has organized 2 rights of nature tribunals. Zoe, please lead us into your talk.
Many thanks, Amelie, and many thanks to all the previous speakers. If you can just bring on the first slide. Before you do, I just need to say that for me personally, I'm a deep ecologist, not a lawyer. So that's the perspective that I'm bringing to rights of nature and rights of nature into that perspective. And that's the basis on which I and our team work. So far more important inclusivity, far more important for us is justice, far more important for us are rights, and the reduction of suffering or eventual elimination of suffering. And that's why I work. I've gone through everything from just mainstream environmental fights, which I don't believe in, to be quite honest, to through the low ecocide, on which I worked at the very early stage with Polly Higgins all the way back in 2010 for a few years, and then came across rights of nature in about 2012, and just dived into that as the solution for quite a lot of problems that we have on this planet. So for me, when somebody talks about problems, I just say permaculture, rights of nature, we are done. Next. I know it's simplifying, but it really does. Those two paradigm shifts really do bring a lot of solutions to the problems that we have today. So why, you asked me to say why Balkans? Well, that's where I come from. I'm from Belgrade. I'm from Serbia, from the Balkans. It was Yugoslavia when I was born. Absolutely love our bioregion. And I always talk about bioregion, not just region, and not about human artificial lines in delineation, which is really harmful, but about natural lines delineation, and that's bioregion. So we have Balkan bioregion and Mediterranean bioregion, which actually overlap because quite a big chunk of the Balkans is in the Med and vice versa. So that's our standpoint. That's the base from which we work. And what I want to present with my presentation is not so much the legal standpoints and the legal processes that the previous speakers covered, but I want to show you that there are various ways, so many different ways, different levels, from very local to absolutely top international levels, from a small community to big community, that you can bring rights of nature into that conversation. Because what is important here is to change the paradigm, to change the thinking, to change to include every single living being. Because for me personally, I don't come from any indigenous thinking or anything. That's my personal. I grew up like that, and when I started saving abandoned animals on the streets and saw their suffering, that's basically what triggered me. And now I work on rights of nature on the deepest possible level. So for me, it's absolutely inevitable, absolutely intuitive. And it's going to happen, rights of nature in law eventually. But what is more important here is that people think like that. Is the thinking, is the inclusivity. Because you can have any law you like. It's just a piece of paper unless it's lived on the ground. And for that, you need your mind and your heart. Those need to shift. And that's what I like to work on. For me, language is extremely important here. For example, word like resource, absolutely despise with passion. That's never, ever, ever used. I don't talk about environmental protection. It's always nature protection. And what is nature? I mean, we haven't touched upon what is nature from my perspective. In any case, it's all life, all living beings, our planet, our home. That's nature, includes humans. And this dissonance from us humans here and some amorph mass, some greenery and rabbits and whatnot out there, nature that I go and visit occasionally, that's where the problem lies. We are all nature. It is all the same. And to borrow the saying of one fantastic lady from North America, an indigenous lady, we are not people fighting to save nature. We are nature fighting to save ourselves. And that is the point that I at least like to bring and present. So what have we been doing in the past 6-7 years, our fantastic team? And I have to emphasize Earth Law Center and especially Grant, pretty much 80% of our work is with Grant on board and King's College Legal Clinic for Human Rights and Environment. Absolutely invaluable legal and every other help. Eduardo is also our dear friend and advisor on our Rights of Nature Mediterranean bioregion. Uli and Marie were witnesses at the tribunal. So networking and working with everybody, including as many people around, as many organizations, as many networks, is absolutely crucial. It is not a single individual group thing. It's all lives, all organisms. And I'll mention that in a bit more detail a bit later on, because we've just launched an initiative for the rights of river pack in Eastern Serbia. So let me just quickly go through the most important things. There's more, but just the most important things that we've been working on. So this is one of the ways that you can include rights of nature in your work, even though there is no rights of nature in law existing. For example, we have 3 complaints before Berne Convention against extractive projects in Serbia, which have been submitted on the basis of rights of nature, 2 of which the one against the world famous or notorious Jadar lithium mine in Serbia, that was the first ever such an international complaint submitted on the basis of rights of nature and accepted as valid. And it's been going on for 5-6 years. It was Grant who drafted that particular argument on rights of nature, and also against the gold mine in Homolje. So that's Wederflow Center. And there is another one against the toxic mine in the southeast of Serbia, and that was with the King's College Legal Clinic for Human Rights and Environment. And we managed to close down that mine, I just have to say, so a little victory to celebrate in the Balkans. Next one, please. So there is also something called International Rights of Nature Tribunal, which is a very high level of citizen tribunal, which aims to show how the system should be working. If we had rights of nature in law at whatever level, and in the system and in judiciary, that's how things would play out and how things should play out. So we organized 2 rights of nature tribunals, one 5 or 6 years ago, I can't remember, and that was on the rights of Balkan rivers, and especially for me, a very dear subject, rights of fish to free flow, because that's something that Grant mentioned earlier. You know, the victims of dams, and dam is to me, inexplicable reason is still on the sustainable finance taxonomy list. Beggars belief. You know, nobody thought of fish, obviously, so we wanted to present rights of fish in all of that. And we did that case a couple of years ago, talking about the Balkan rivers. Uli presented the case about it being a Balkan-wide problem. Marie talked about the political bit. We had an expert ichthyologist talking about suffering of fish. Unfortunately, local people from Koponik that we work with had to withdraw from all of that because of persecution, but that's something that people in the Balkans will be familiar with. Next one, please. The second case we did a year and a half ago was against the Canadian mining company that wants to open a gold mine in the phenomenal Homolje region in eastern Serbia. Well, this is Homolje, really. Can you imagine 350 square kilometers of gold mining there? And that's connected to the complaint, the Berne Convention complaint. And once we get the verdict, which should be promulgated anytime soon, we will include it in our reports and in our ask. So that's another way in which you can argue for other living beings, not just for humans, because that's what at the heart of all, at least my work and our team's work, argue on behalf of other beings, even if the official law, the positive law, doesn't have it in itself. It doesn't matter. We still include all the victims of a potential ecocide in the argumentation, in the asks. And that's a very, very powerful way to honor the victims. Next one, please. Yes, I'll come back to this one later. I'll just quickly run through that. We Grant and Monty from International Rivers did the original draft of the National Rights of River Law for Serbia, which I believe to be unique in the world, because it's usually rights of nature usually done for an individual river. But what I wanted to create here is a framework based on which every other river in Serbia or wider in the Balkans, then communities can look upon that, look at the framework and draw from there. So everything is already there for them. We are working on a couple of rivers, River Pek, as I mentioned, the River Topčiderka in Belgrade. And at the end of the presentation, I will just mention the different ways in which we're working on these, which can be helpful to people. What is important here is rivers are relatively easy to argue for because they have the beginning and the end, and they have their own flow, and they're visible. People are very much connected to them, and that's why you will see most of rights of nature cases around the world about rivers concretely, which I think is a fantastic introduction into rights of nature, because it's water, it's life. It's as simple as that. But I'll come back to this one. Thank you. Next one, please.
Zoe, just to let you know that we need to move on to the discussion soon. So if you could
just quickly
try and wrap up quickly.
You mentioned Renewable Energy Directive. We are working on an initiative against forest biomass on the basis of rights of forest. So you can work on that level. Next one, please. You can work on a city level, like we have a group of our various communities in Belgrade working on these different initiatives. Next one, please. Or you can work on a big bioregional level, like we work on the Mediterranean through our Declaration of the Rights of the Mediterranean bioregion. Next one, please. Or at the very highest level, and that's what Grant already mentioned, we worked on one of the motions, which is on rights of nature and ecological recovery. And I'm extremely happy to say that was adopted overwhelmingly into resolution. Next one, please. Oh, no, if you can go just to 5. So just to briefly mention, we are working currently on 2 rivers in Serbia. That's slide 5, please. One is River Pek, for which we have local councillors in the city of Majdanpek who will be arguing on behalf. That's the one, thank you. On behalf of River Pek. So for that one, we will be asking for a local law. We probably won't get it, but nonetheless, that's what the campaign is going to be. But with River Topčiderka, we are going to be working on a charter. That's Povelja in our languages, and that's a bit softer approach where we'll be working with local communities, with artists, with the Cultural Center of Belgrade on bioremediation. So that's another way to respect all other living beings, even if it's not in law, but you still respect rights of nature to live. And that would be that would be the point of everything, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe, very much. So given that we had some technical difficulties and the time has progressed, nevertheless, I think what we will do now is first get some questions from the audience Q&A before if we all decide we want to hang in here and discuss a bit more, then we can come with additional questions. I will have to stop sharing, I think, and I will have to grab the questions from the audience Q&A. There's a question, says, in my country, public interest is often equated with economic growth or strategic infrastructure, even when projects irreversibly damage whole ecosystems. Yet healthy ecosystems are the very foundation of healthy human societies. How can civil society reshape the legal definition of public interest so that the rights of nature and ecological integrity become central to what counts as public interest rather than treated as obstacles to development? Is there anybody who wants to take this question and react on it? I'm not sure if it's referring to a particular speaker, so.
I can try if you hear me. Yes, you do hear me.
Yes,
that's perfect.
We do hear you.
No, I can try, and especially since I will really have to leave at 5, so I might not be able to take all the resting questions. But I think this is up to us, actually. So when you say how can the civil society movement help reshape, I see Zoe agrees. It's up to us. What do we do with it? And I mean, we have contradictions. And sometimes, we say we need to respect planetary boundaries, and economic is about, eco, the house, nomos, the law, basically environmental norms, and economy, is about how to manage your house, basically. That's a bit the way. So if we look at economy as a term, then you need to look at it as one single planet, and then you go directly to the donut theory, to the beyond growth reflections, and so on. Well, whatever. We have all this thinking that is being developed that, okay, is not fashionable right now on the main, media and so on, but that is fashionable in a growing number of people, organizations, and so on. And just like the rights of nature, we need to dig into that direction. But we indeed do have our contradiction. Now, how can we make it hopeful, both for the people and for the economy, and try to say the economy will go better if we take care of nature? I think this is up to us in each of our domain of activities. And of course, I mean, carbon majors, all the oil and gas, they will have no activities in the future, but they won't anyhow have activities in the future because there will be no planet. So, in the end, it's going to be over. But also, we talk a lot about rivers. If you empty the rivers from their fishes, from the living, then you won't make money because of the living. And just to give you one example, but we had a huge battle over a directive that is called Nature Restoration Law. So it was really a first European framework to protect and restore and repair nature. It was emptied of a lot, but still, in this debate, you could find the green movements with an S in its diversity, and big multinationals like Unilever, like Nestlé, like, I don't know, Mars Incorporated, and all those big firms that, we fight against most of our times. But most of those big firms, they were saying precisely this. If there is no nature left, there is no profit left. And that's why we need to restore and repair nature. So, we have sometimes unexpected allies, and we need to, take their hands at that moment to move forward. Of course, they are not, ecocentric in their approach right now. We still have a lot of work to do. But yeah, I would say this is a bit up to us to redefine it.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you very much. I'll bring up the second question. Brian, sorry, you wanted to react on that as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add something. Thanks. I just want to read the Water Framework Directive here, the exception for public interest. It says, there may be grounds for exemptions from the requirements to prevent further deterioration or to achieve good status under specific conditions, and this is protecting rivers and waters, if the failure is the result of unforeseen blah, 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 or overriding public interest of new modifications to the physical characteristics of a surface water body. So, here it is, the premier law protecting rivers and waters, and there's a big exception for overriding things that are in the overriding public interest. And this is a major critique with all legal systems whereby there's these questions of, do we do A or B? Do we, promote the economy or protect the forest? And traditionally, legal systems determine these tensions by saying what's in the interest of humans. That's the question they ask. And that's jurisprudence. It's the philosophy of law. And we do this all the time when our rights are in conflict. What's in the best interest of society is the question asked. With the public interest question, I would ask what's in the best interest of the entire ecosystem of which humans are a part. I would consider nature to be part of the public as well, because it is. And, in terms of things I would love to change in EU law right now, I would love to change, define the public interest. You could put a definition in there and say the public interest includes nature. Like, that would be a profound shift for how the Water Framework Directive is applied, because all of a sudden you can't ignore it for, economic considerations that are not restoring ecosystems and watersheds to health. So I wanted to make that point. One other little point is that I do think there needs to be a larger reckoning with financial systems and the rights of nature. People have seen reports that the financial sector invested $2.6 trillion in the destruction of biodiversity recently, and there's trillions of dollars of investments in the destruction of nature. We have capitalistic systems that treat nature as property and fuel, a huge portion of all our money into destroying it. So as long as we have financial systems that are incentivized by the system to wreak havoc on the entire planet with no limits, how are any of our environmental laws actually going to work? It's really total lunacy. And so, you know, I would encourage rights of nature supporters to also do a deep dive into economic policy that is in harmony with rights of nature. And this can include things like the circular economy, permaculture, as Zoe mentioned, of course, regenerative agriculture. And so I think that's an area that needs more work. And if we're not creating economic policy along with the rights of nature, it's just not going to work at the scale that we need.
Thanks, Grant. I want to throw in a question here. Well, first of all, could you mention very briefly if you have any experience with the attempts to, you know, challenge rights of nature laws with overriding public interest? Maybe that's a question that can be answered relatively briefly. If there's any experience in the group.
I don't, other than to recommend that countries themselves could define overriding public interest in a way that considers nature's needs. I don't think there's any any reason that couldn't do that. Otherwise, no. Zoe might. Zoe.
No. I don't know of any examples. What I just wanted to say here is quite the opposite. Rights of nature is public benefit, because we are all nature. I mean, how can a healthy soil or healthy water or living community be against public benefit? It's just beyond me. So for me, that's one and the same. Those people who talk in those terms don't really understand what rights of nature is and what it brings and what it means. So do understand it thoroughly, and then you can talk about, you know, public law benefits and whatnot, because it's, for me, it's one and the same, period.
Thanks. I want to throw in another question from the audience and then back that up with a question I wanted to ask myself. Is simply granting rights to rivers on paper meaningless when we have hundreds of pieces of evidence that the laws, and that person specifically referring to Serbia, are not being respected, and that this is clearly being done knowingly? And maybe the more general question that I would also want to pose here is, and we know that from the Balkans, you know, we have a lot of countries that are transposing existing EU environmental legislation quite well, but the problem is enforcement. And I think that can be extended to other parts of Europe as well. So how do we come to terms with that tension between good legislation and lack of enforcement?
Do you want
Maybe
me to
we can let Eduardo answer first, since he
Okay,
has answered
we have experience with European legislation which is not enforced around the Mar Menor. We had the best nitrates, water framework, environmental impact assessment. Many different European laws were applicable to save the Mar Menor, and we met a disaster. So what we need for enforcement, we need empower nature by empowering people. People who believes in nature is the best tool to participate, to act, to go to court, to go to administration, to make pressure. I mean, empower people. Empower. If you make rights of nature without empowering people, then maybe it's more law on paper. This is my opinion.
Thanks, Eduardo. I don't know who's next. Who wanted to answer next? Grant, I think you put up your hand first.
I so strongly agree with what Eduardo said. You know, one of the misconceptions of the rights of nature movement is that it's just stronger environmental laws. That's just one part of it. Really, as much as anything, it's about giving nature its own agency. And if you think of any movement for rights in the past, you can have a welfare law that protects someone who doesn't have rights, but it's not the same as giving them a voice to actually participate in society. So rights of nature is so much about giving nature a formal voice on which it can act. And that's what Mar Menor has done. There's this multifaceted, enormously sophisticated guardianship body that speaks for Mar Menor. And do you know who that's replacing? In many ways, it's replacing government, who traditionally would balance economic interests with nature's interests to kind of speak for nature. But now we have those who have spent careers protecting ecosystems, speaking as their voice, and they have power. Nature has power and it has agency. So I so agree with what you said, Eduardo. It's empowering nature, and that's something people forget in this movement. That's probably the most important thing.
Thank you very much. So you wanted to react on that, or can I go with another question?
Go, because Eduardo
Okay,
pretty much said what I wanted. So
yeah, all right, great. We won't let you hang on for a long time anymore. I hope you can still be there until 5:15. Maybe a last question from my side. Does rights of nature translate into actual protection of nature on the ground? We've heard before that that rights of nature legislation is not just about nature protection, but it still concerns us in this group. I'm thinking of protection against strong industrial logging or mining interests, as I don't know if you have examples from South America, for example. I'm thinking of the River Ganges that has been awarded rights, but is severely, one of the most polluted and dammed rivers in India. And also in case of the Mar Menor, I would be interested in how the actual nature protection results are going. So maybe we can start with Zoe this time, and then
yeah, well, you mentioned examples. Grant may have wanted to say this, but you mentioned examples from South America, and this is my absolutely favorite example. Ecuador. They've had rights of nature in their constitution, so at the highest level, so basically the umbrella law, and everything trickles down there from there. And that's the ideal way to have rights of nature in law, because then it covers everything. There was this famous case several years ago, and it's my absolutely favorite, in one of the rainforests. And if you know that, if you know anything about Ecuador, it's got some of the richest biodiversity on the planet anywhere. Somebody wanted to open a mine. I can't remember the name of the company, and it's irrelevant. They wanted to open a mine in the middle of all of that burst of life. So fantastic activist Carlos Zorrilla took it to court, because they have rights of nature in their constitution. So you can take cases like that to court on the basis of rights of nature. And his argument was that there were two little species, two frogs, tiny little frog species, one of which they thought went extinct a long time ago, but actually didn't. And one was all the way from prehistoric times. He argued their right to their home and their right to their life. And the court agreed, said, through rights of nature, those frogs have rights to their home, to their life, to their existence, to their evolution, and everything that stands. And the mine was stopped on the basis of that. So two little frogs, species of frogs, obviously with them the rest of the life in the forest, secured their right to life through rights of nature in law. Very simple. It's my absolute I'm not saying it works every time, but it's an evolution. We spoke with Eduardo a while ago about guardianship, and we asked him certain things, and he actually laughed. He said, I don't know, Zoe, we're making it up as we go along, because it's such a new thing. We are figuring it out on the go. So, all these critiques being thrown at us from all over the place, jump in and help us figure it out. It's an open book at the moment. We can all write it together. So, but there are examples. There are really, really good examples of it actually working. In the UK, there are rivers now being granting rights, and we are talking about major capitalist country. There are examples in the US where a mountain owns itself. That's my absolutely second favorite example, because nature doesn't belong to anybody; it belongs to itself. So there are examples, there are precedents. We just need to make it, more massive. That's all.
Thanks, Zoe. Eduardo still has his hand up.
Yeah, I want to add that I would add that in the case of Mar Menor, we have not only a law, an act, we have 600,000 people watching. 600 people watching what's happening in the environmental policies or in the environmental law enforcement. And what we had is in 2016 or 2019, Mar Menor was green, but now the Water Authority and the Environmental Authority and the Ministry of the Environment of Spain are working hard because of this massive support for the ecosystem from the people. And the way to restore or to recover the Mar Menor is going on thanks to the invasion of millions of euros. They come from next generation funds applied for the Mar Menor. But I am sure that without the 600,000 signatures, the politics, they would not, they have not take his job, do the job.
Thank you, Eduardo. I have one last question from the audience that I would like to bring in here. And maybe, I don't know, Annette, if you wanted to also react, this could be also something for you to reflect on. Here's a person saying that how can the concept of rights of nature realistically take root in societies across the Balkans, but that could be applied to other places as well, that are still economically developing, have weak institutions, high levels of corruption, and are deeply rooted traditional mindsets, where rivers and nature in general are predominantly seen as economic resources rather than rights-bearing entities. So how realistic is it to establish rights of nature for Balkan rivers under such conditions? There's another person who's asking, to what extent could the rights of nature approach be applied to the case of the Vjosa River in Albania? Maybe that could be tied to the same question. And Grant also has started working on River Una, I've heard, looking into the possibility to forward rights of nature legislation there. So if maybe two of you want to still comment on that question before we close. Annette, I don't know if you want to go first because you haven't spoken yet, and then we can take Grant.
Yeah, thanks. Really interesting questions, all of them. Maybe very quickly on the case that Zoe mentioned, the Los Cedros case, I think in Ecuador, which is really fascinating. And I think here again, you asked about when does it actually protect nature? And yeah, there we have the case that against very powerful interests, rights of nature have made a difference against this multinational mining companies. And I think the case is also really fascinating in, well, and again, what goes beyond the law. So this one case has led to songs by British musicians, to all kind of different scientists talking together, to initiatives in, I don't know, has inspired initiatives in New York. And so this, I think, is really fascinating what one case can influence. However, there again, we have to ask, like, who is heard, who's not heard, what is the bigger picture? If you look at this one case, which gives hope is so important. But yeah, so about the question about how to, if rights of nature are realistic, with certain mindsets given? Well, the first question I think is to ask, like, is rights of nature then the right tool? It might be, I'm not saying it's not, but like, I think that's just the question that has to be asked, like, why do we want this term? And the second thing is, I think that's like a bigger point that these concerns have to be taken serious, like these economic concerns have to be taken serious. And only if they are addressed together with the concerns of nature and natural entities, a real transition can happen. And so, if we think together, I think that, again, like a very big and quite well-rehearsed point also, but this idea of anthropocentrism, that, or maybe also going back to public interest. So the problem for me is not only that public interest is not taking account of nature's interest, which is surely true, but it's also not taking account of most of public's interest, right? And if you think those two things together, like the interests of the majority of people and the interests of nature, I think only then we have the force to actually build that kind of popular power that is needed for really profound transformation, because otherwise it won't happen, because we're up against such powerful systems.
Thank you, Annette. Grant, you have the privilege to wrap up the question session with a brief answer.
Great, thanks. Brief answer. Even in politically challenging circumstances, let's say in a country where there's some issues with current environmental law enforcement, I think a lot of these countries, including Bosnia and Serbia and others, can see rights of nature as a point of pride, something to inspire the country, and they understand the importance of reputation as well. So I would recommend any country that's like, oh, I don't know, this sounds like a little scary, it's new, do one pilot project. Do one pilot project for one river and see how it goes. And I promise you, you're going to see thousands of people inspired. You're going to see the engagement of youth, and you're going to see your reputation globally get a lot of energy and excitement. And I would encourage anyone to do one pilot project. Reach out to me. With the Vjosa, this is a wild river national park. It's an incredible model. The advocates behind that model also won a Goldman Prize. I would say with national parks generally of any variety, the obvious way to integrate rights of nature into it is to create a guardianship body within a national park framework where nature has a voice in the park. This is what essentially happened in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So there are a lot of legal innovations out there that are possible, but I just tell anyone, give it a try and let's see how it goes. The current system is not working. Let's try something new. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This discussion has been like a teaser, so there's lots more to say, lots more questions. We may follow it up with a second edition of the webinar, or maybe just a question and answer session. I want to thank all of you speakers who have joined us here and made the effort to be here and answer difficult questions and take extra time. Also, thanks to everyone who still hangs in there and listens. We really appreciate it that you came. And thanks again to my colleagues, especially the one that I forgot to mention earlier, Marcus. Thanks for being our tech backup. We have another webinar coming up. Let's see if I can, yes, on 12th of March. And that one is something very different, but very much worth joining, because we're basically watching a very beautiful documentary about a place of wild beauty that could potentially also be a potential, a canyon that could be a rewarded rights of nature. I don't know. The film is about something a little bit different, but it's really worth watching. The premiere will come on 14th of March for the International Day of Action for Rivers. That will be the online premiere, but we'll watch it together on the 12th of March in another webinar with the film team. So please join us. The link will be up on our website very soon. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. And I wish you a good evening and a great week, and hope to see you again soon.